Hello, and welcome to episode 7 of Coffee and Conversation with Dr. Doom. That's me. I am joined today by 3 amazing students who've been doing some work with reproductive freedom, and they are Abby, Grace, and Luis. And I'm going to allow each of them to introduce themselves to all of you. So Abby, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Abby. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a junior political science major, originally from Rome, Georgia. So issues of voter suppression and election integrity are very important to me and really hit home. And I serve as the political director in Students for Reproductive Freedom.
And I am Grace. I also use she, her, hers pronouns. I'm currently in CGS, but planning to go into CAS with an independent major. I am the technical director for SURF, which basically means I just keep track of everybody who's involved with us. And I'm originally from New Jersey, and this is something that hits home to me as a person with a uterus myself. Reproductive freedom is important.
Well, that's certainly understandable. Please.
Hi, I'm Luis, and my pronouns are he, him, and I'm majoring in bio on a pre-med track, and I'm the treasurer for SURF, and I'm from California. And the big thing about me joining the club was I just wanted to help educate, and I think a lot of issues nowadays just are regarding ignorance, and with helping educate people that will just kind of make the world a better place.
One would hope. Yeah. That's, I kind of did bet my whole life on that. So we'll see how it pays off. I'm not going to know for a while. Thank you all very, very much for being here. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the time. And I'm interested to know first, well, whoever would like to start, tell us a little bit about the group, what your aims are, what sorts of activities you've done, anything like that that you want people to know about the work that you're trying to do. And anyone can go ahead.
Okay, so our mission statement, from our Constitution, is 1, promote a reproductive freedom by educating and energizing students on campus, and 2, translate the activism into civic involvement, community service, and helping promote reproductive justice on every level of government, and 3rd is to create a network of reproductive justice advocates in the BU community.
Reproductive justice advocates. Could one of you jump in and sort of explain what that means and why that's important?
Yeah, so I also think it's really important to mention that we are a Planned Parenthood affiliated group. And so we work very closely with not just Planned Parenthood in Boston, but also other, they're called Gen Action groups around Massachusetts. And so our goal is both in creating awareness of different problems and conversations around reproductive freedom. So whether that be, starting with midwifery, historical, how we got to where we are today, whether it's abortion rights, whether we're talking about, sex ed and sexual pleasure, we kind of run, through a lot of different topics and both create awareness, but also create advocacy by talking about what we can do in our individual and political lives to create the kinds of changes that we believe are needed.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about, and I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but is there anything that you can say about why you personally have decided not only to support reproductive freedom, but to actually go out and actively spread the word? Where does that civic nature, civic-minded nature that you're displaying, where does that come from?
I think for me personally, I grew up in a pretty conservative town, so that there wasn't a lot of education regarding reproductive justice or reproductive freedom or just reproductive rights in general. Yeah. And so I think with the 2016 election, I saw a lot of that with just the conversations I was having with other people my age who really didn't understand, what abortion was or what it even meant to have abortion access or even just birth control itself. Mm-hmm. So I really just, I think that's when it was kind of like, okay, this is something that obviously relates to me because again, I have a uterus. Mm-hmm. Although it relates to really anybody with sex organs. Mm-hmm.
Certainly it does.
Yeah, but yeah, so I just saw that people didn't know what was happening, and so I wanted to educate myself. And then surf is just a really incredible group, and I wanted to make my education into action and help educate others. And then, like Abby said, take it into our lives, like how we can actually engage with it and make it better and more accessible.
Yeah, and that it's so important. Like one of the reasons that I do these shows is that I want to highlight that anyone can step up and do something. And what's really interesting to me is that I've done this. So this is my 7th show. Luis is the first male that has been a guest. I didn't do that on purpose. I was, you know, the people that I was meeting through my work this summer with the group that I founded, Better Elections Now, all of these dynamic people were women. And it's been terrific because, you know, women have not had the access and the voice out there that they deserve, being more than half the population. And it's exciting for someone like me who's been trying to suggest to my students that we have a lot wrong and it can all be fixed if you stand up and do it. It's fantastic to see so many young women standing up and fighting back against what is, it's something that you shouldn't have to fight in 2020, to be quite frank, right? I mean, you shouldn't have to be still fighting over this. No one should, you know, male or female should have to be fighting over an issue that should have been settled in the 60s. And that's it's a frustration, and I'm sure it's a frustration for you. One of the things that, Grace, that you mentioned, which I wanted to pick up on, was the lack of education. And I would love for all of you to sort of throw in about how have you noticed the lack of education on political topics in general. Doesn't necessarily have to be reproductive freedom. But what I'm finding is that your generation is finding that no one bothered to teach you what it is you needed to know. And there are a number of you, although it's still a small number, who are trying to learn to teach other people. But that's a huge topic that I think is important. And I would love for you to sort of talk for a few minutes each about where did we fail you in educating you? And by we, I mean Generation X and the boomers, right? Your parents and grandparents. So, and you can, in any topic that you want to cover, where did we fail you? What is it that you found out that you don't know, or that you were shocked to learn, like about voter suppression, for example, you know, anything like that? I would love to hear where it is that we failed you, because that's a really important topic.
I think like at a meeting last Tuesday, and we talked about sex education in elementary schools, like just in prior to and how a lot of us figured out about our bodies was through, you know, through peers and the internet. And that isn't necessarily the most academic source to pull from. So there's a lot of mystery kind of going in and like kind of filling in between the gaps. And like we did some research, and the Netherlands is a country where their equality rates, like their rated equality is very high. It's top 3, and like we're not even in the top 40. So that's very sad. And like a lot of what they do is teaching kids early on that it's all right to be okay with your body, like to understand certain things. Like we talked about how like some people thought they had issues because they weren't taught that, oh, you know, discharge was normal, or like certain things were like the way it is. And we thought it was just something like, you know, and especially being kids, like you're kind of paranoid, you don't want people to judge you. So there's so much mentality going into it. And like we've even talked about like the orgasm gap, and how like women have been taught a certain way that just is not sufficient, like how it's a lot of mentality that goes into it, not just physical stuff. And like how men are like boys are taught how to ejaculate, whereas women are just kind of there for reproductive means rather than like pleasure. And like everyone has had a very relatively similar story in that we've learned very simple stuff like just puberty and nothing along the lines of like prevention or like safe sex. And it's more of the focus is on abstinence rather than just like tackling the topic head on.
That's, you know, the grim reality is that your sex education was left to pornography. And that's really awful because it gives a wrong, you know, a distorted view. And the really awful part about it, putting on top of all the damage that that does by letting that be the tool rather than medical instruction. The worst part it is that it was partly left that way because some people made so much money on it. And, you know, of all the things that have been easily banned in our society, you know, the ones that make the most money never get banned. And there are people that made an awful lot of money on shoving pornography in your faces at a very young age. And that was a huge mistake. And it is a huge problem, I think. But I'm sorry, you know, Abby or Grace, if you want to pick up where Luis left off, we were sort of talking about all of that.
Yeah, I might go down a little bit of a different road.
Please.
And just kind of talk about something that we like really talk about as a club or as an e-board is that, you know, like we understand that we're all college students, and so we're not necessarily in the best place to like be educators ourselves because we're still learning. And so like looking for experts and, you know, in like reputable sources, because as Luis said, like it's not, you know, always easy to like, you know, pick through that information yourself. So we try our best to like facilitate conversations about different issues, but not like try to, you know, like shove our own viewpoints like at people, but like find, you know, a lot of resources that are, you know, good and yeah, just like very educational. But I really think that, you know, when you ask the question about, you know, like what, like in what ways were we failed through like the education system, I think especially around issues like this, I don't know if any generation has ever succeeded in education about issues surrounding reproductive freedom. Oftentimes reproductive freedom issues are labeled as women's issues, even though that's not really true.
Right.
And it is, I don't think, a controversial statement to say that people don't care, or the people who are in charge of making curriculums do not care about women's issues, you know. So it you know, isn't surprising that, you know, we don't talk about abortion or birth control or, you know, pleasure or whatever it is, because these issues aren't, you know, important. They're not profitable, you know, when we are talking about the system. And so I think that it's really important to not only like educate ourselves, but also look at the ways in which, you know, like education has, you know, failed. Like our first meeting this year, like was basically like, how did we get to where we are? You know, the history of midwifery, for example, is like, you know, like deeply rooted in racism. And, you know, the reproductive justice movement itself, you know, started from the eugenics movement. And so I think like grappling with that past and making sure that we understand like the movement that we are stepping into and like the, you know, the conversations that have been had in the past and that are being had now have roots in dark places. And if we like want to make changes, we need to be careful with what we're doing and where we're going, and understanding like that history is extremely important.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think both Abby and Luis made really great points that we're just not taught a lot about sexual, you know, our sex ed really lacks in this country, like you said too, Professor. And then when it comes to other things, even just like, I don't know, I didn't learn really about how the government functioned until like high school.
Right.
And even then, it wasn't really part of my curriculum. I just had an incredible teacher.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of times it falls on certain teachers' shoulders. And then in that case, you have to be careful because people can take their inherent biases into the classroom. And in a lot of states and a lot of places, that's really detrimental when those inherent biases are racist or built on false realities. I just think that the education that we continue to push, that we aim for a good education, it just has to be accurate, truthful, and then inherently, anti-racist, focusing on equality. And we just have to make sure that that is across the board everywhere. It shouldn't be that different states have different narratives and ideas of what actually happened, when in reality, there is just one truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an enormous challenge in a system like ours. And here's the grim reality. So in the night when my parents were younger, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, the United States had the best public education system in the world. Now we're like number 38 or something. That wasn't an accident. The public education system was dismantled on purpose because only an uneducated population would accept neoliberalism, which is a total catastrophe, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you are smarter than more people on this planet because you recognize that the Reagan Revolution has been a total disaster and neoliberalism has been a total disaster, right? All it was a cover story to let the rich loot. That's it. The rest of it was nonsense. It was just a cover story, right? Now, how is that related to reproductive freedom? Because once the Roe v. Wade decision was made, most people just assumed, okay, that's settled, So, and I hope you don't mind me giving you this little background. It's something that I cover in class, and I'm telling you because I want you to be able to tell other people, to be quite honest. So if you'll indulge me for just a moment. So all of a sudden, around 1980, this becomes an issue. And it was grabbed onto by the televangelists, who then energized the evangelical Christians, right, on this one issue. Why? Why all of a sudden in 1978 did this happen? Because Jimmy Carter was going to revoke the tax-free status of religious schools that discriminated by race or sex. And that meant hundreds of schools, private schools in the South, would lose their tax-free status. Hundreds of them. Because during segregation, the white population sent their kids to private schools and they let public schools fall apart in the South. So you have this, all of a sudden, these televangelists are saying that abortion is the biggest issue on the planet. Why all of a sudden? Well, see, the corporate interests don't like abortion and they don't like reproductive rights and freedom. Because the more people there are, the lower wages they can pay. That's it. All of this nonsense about abortion comes down to the corporate interests want to pay lower wages. That's it. The rest of it is a cover story. And knowing that grim reality is really depressing. But hopefully, knowing that, you can take the fight forward, as you will have to. And again, I think as a member of Generation X, half of my generation is horrible and half of it's great. I'm of course on the great side. I mean, obviously, you wouldn't be here otherwise. But half of us sold out, just like the baby boomers sold you out. And they sold me out too. They just did. That's the reality. And the country's now drowning in lies and nonsense, right? I mean, the other grim reality is that Donald Trump is the end result of the Reagan Revolution, right? I mean, it started in 1980, it ends in 2020 with him. And he is now, of course, I didn't mention when we started, today is the 19th of November. It's a Thursday, and the President of the United States is trying to stay in power unconstitutionally. And it has me sick to my stomach. And I'm sure you're all sick to your stomach too. Because the grim reality is this, as I told Luis, and you can assure the viewing audience that I'm telling the truth. Will you please do that when I've made my statement?
Yeah, of course.
What did I say this summer? He can't leave office because as soon as he does, the New York Attorney General is going to indict or arrest him. He can't leave office. he could flee, but then he gives up any delusional hope he has of returning to power somehow, being swept back because whatever. So we have a real problem. Not only the damage that he's done for the last 4 years, which is considerable. And by the way, I'm sure that you follow issues of judges being confirmed, and some astonishing number of his judges were judged unqualified by the ABA. You guys have so much damage to undo. See, this is why they call me Dr. Doom. Because I keep looking at this thing, looking like, why is no one doing anything? But then I remember that people like you are, and it makes me get through the day, and I appreciate that, because I really do need it. I have to tell you that. So can you tell me, any one of you, all of you, can you tell me in the work that you've done, what has been a positive thing for you? Something that you feel comfortable talking about, that you did, or that you engaged, or a person that you helped, or something that, at the end of that experience, you're like, wow, I'm really happy I was able to participate in that. Anything like that you could share with us?
I can go because, like I said in the beginning, I am from Georgia. I'm a very political person, and I have been working since 2016, making phone calls. I've, dragged some surf friends into that too, and sending text messages. We're gonna write some postcards as a club. And I've had 4 years of people telling me that I was crazy, like that Georgia's not gonna flip, Georgia's a red state. And it's been like, it's also really frustrating sometimes because people up here seem sometimes to see the country in a binary, the good north and the bad backward south.
Mm-hmm.
And you just kind of have to remind people that like they're in a liberal bubble, and that, the South, a lot of Southerners are being held hostage by Republican governors. And in 2018, Stacey Abrams' gubernatorial campaign was like the first campaign I ever worked on. And I was calling voters and knocking on doors of people who had never been talked to before or hadn't voted since 2008, and just like, were ready to be a part of the political process but didn't know what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
People who were like, oh, like I can knock on doors with you, or like, where do I sign up to make phone calls? And like that was just like really, amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And then, she lost, and it was devastating, but it was also radicalizing for me, because it was like, change can be made, and we don't have to do that around, like we can do that by reaching out to new people, by people that, the Democratic Party has written off as non-voters.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been making calls, for the last 2 years, and then just like the validation on, I guess it was Thursday night when Georgia like really flipped, and it was like, one, for everybody who said it wasn't going to, that it wasn't possible, like it is possible, and this kind of success can be replicated throughout the country. We just like can't count out like anywhere. But also it's just like, it's exciting to see, people who just didn't believe, have this belief, and also the kinds of that work can be done, and that issues, are like that people are excited, and like we have this runoff, and like you don't really see the doubters anymore, because like Stacey Abrams and Latasha Brown and so many other great women, especially women of color, have like come and like created radical change. And like just that being so close to home has been like incredible, and so like hopeful for me just to be so close to.
Oh, that's great. What a terrific thing to say. Grace or Luis?
Yeah, I don't think it's as well, actually, I was going to say it's not as monumental as Georgia going blue, but I think anything we do, even if the small, even something that feels small, has ripple effects.
Absolutely.
And so I think just with my time at SURF, just reflecting on that, I think it's always really nice to see the different people who come, and then the people who keep coming because they enjoy the environment we have, our atmosphere, and they learn a lot, or they get involved in the work. They ask, how can we help? What more can we do? And I think at the end of the day, that's really what I aim to do in my work, is just help people see what's going on, and then help empower them to feel like, no, you can do something, even if it's just telling other people, hey, this is a problem and there's ways we can fix it. like Abby said, let's postcard. That's something that takes like 30 minutes.
Mhm.
But it has a big impact. You reach people that you didn't think you could reach. So yeah, I think just empowerment through education is something that's really important to me.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, especially like definitely I fall along the same lines with Grace in that just giving people a sense of hope is just like probably one of the smallest but like best things that we could be doing right now,
Mhm.
because it just seems like everything is just in chaos. And if we have like that little drive, you know, to keep doing one thing like the postcards and then like move on to something bigger like, you know, Georgia Flipping Blue, it would just like, you know, small things that it's a snowball effect. It starts from the bottom, it makes it a way up.
Right. That's absolutely right. I mean, you know, when I started Better Elections Now, it was a small group. It was, you know, and it was basically a Facebook group. This is in 2016. And it was like 400 people, and we did some social media stuff about trying to convince the electors to switch their vote to someone other than Trump and Clinton at that point. And we didn't change anything, but we did have an impact on the people that we were near. And what I think people don't realize is, no, you know, it's very rare that one person or one group can change things everywhere. It's groups, each doing something locally that builds up over time. I mean, that's what it is. Now, this is enhanced, of course, by the internet and things like that, which does make things easy. And I have said, and Luis, again, you can confirm that I said this, I am an advocate for you and the millennials to absolutely have a general strike and shut down the whole country. You could shut it down tomorrow. And I know you think I'm being funny. I'm not. I'm being very serious. You could organize a general strike on Zoom in a week, and you could shut down the entire country. You could. And you could then demand anything you wanted. So I'm hoping that you will do that. And I have to say, fulfilling my Dr. Doom moniker, if he doesn't give up, we're going to have to overthrow him. Right? I mean, he can't stay there unconstitutionally. And if he's not going to flee and he doesn't want to go to jail. So, you know, I think that it is very unfortunate that too much misery was dumped on your shoulders. And it's not fair. But here's the good thing. You know, the good thing is you can take this as an opportunity to build something much better. And that's what I'm hoping you're going to do. And you should ignore everybody over the age of 40. Just ignore them. And you build what you want. So I think you're three amazing people. And I really, really appreciate that you chose to give up some time this evening to talk to me. Before I do my little wrap up thing, because I'm out of coffee, I believe that you have an upcoming event, if you wanted to mention that.
So as like one of our big projects, it's not really an event so much, but we're trying to get a contraceptive machine on campus. So like that would distribute condoms and Plan B.
Mhm.
And that's a project that's been going on prior to us even joining the board.
Oh.
And
it's okay.
And so that's kind of one of our like bigger projects. And we've been having we've been trying to plan small things like, or like smaller things like guest speakers.
Uh-huh.
And like, I'm pretty sure last year or last spring, we had a trans woman who she was the first one to be moved from a male jail to a female jail. Mm-hmm. And she just gave us her story like that. And wow. It was just very moving and to hear like what she had to go through.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like stuff like hearing other people's sides, like that other people's sides that are just silenced was just very like kind of one of our bigger things we want to get across as well.
Mm-hmm. The abuse of trans people is pretty astonishing when you understand the extent of it. It's really astonishing. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and we do actually have an event coming up pretty soon, December 6th. It's in collaboration with Mount Holyoke because they're another Gen Action group, meaning that they also get funding from Planned Parenthood. And it's just with a like sex education, pleasure, oh my goodness, pleasure positive sex writer and educator, Yana Talon Hicks. So that'll definitely be a more uplifting, fun kind of event where we can just, I guess, talk about sex, really.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. Well, it's important. It's, you know, a healthy attitude towards sex and a healthy sex life is important for a happy life. There's nothing wrong with that. It's, you know, it's part of being human. And there's a lot of nonsense around it for some reason, which doesn't make any sense. Well, except for the
Exactly, I guess-
activation. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say this is just one seminar aiming to make up for what we lost in our younger years, where everyone failed us, as we said earlier.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This was a wonderful episode, and I really appreciate you being here. And I hope that you will say hi anytime, and anytime that your group has something to publicize or whatever, please tell me, because I have the website for Better Elections Now, and we have Instagram and stuff, so we could help you. So please just ask, okay?
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Thank you
All right.
so much.
Thank you. It was great to meet you all. Well, Luis, I knew. Luis was my student, but Abby and Grace, I really appreciated meeting you, and please say hello anytime, okay? Thank you, guys.